It was made crystal clear to me the day I came across the quarterdeck at Buds that we don't want lieutenants as new guys in the SEAL teams. We want lieutenants to already have 1, 2, or 3 platoons under their belt and be platoon OICs, or officers in charge.
Hi, this is your Project Management Cowboy coming right back to you with another exciting podcast. One of the missions of our podcast is to go through the world and invite guests that have specialty knowledge. We're very, very excited in this podcast to introduce to you a guest, which we're very, very honored that he took the time out of his day to meet with us, Captain John Doolittle. Hi, John.
Hey, Mark. How are you?
We'll introduce him a little bit. Now, this could be the classical clickbait. All you have to do nowadays is say Navy SEAL, and everybody's watching your YouTube videos. Okay, there's all sorts of wonderful Navy SEALs out there whose service we can be very proud of. But one of the things I always think when I listen to these podcasters is, where's the management magic? And I'm so happy that we have a guest that's an officer. So let's jump right in. Hi, John. Welcome on board.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Your title is Captain. For those of you who are not from the Navy, let's clarify what is the equivalent rank in the other services.
So in the Navy, captain is an 06, which is equivalent to a colonel in the Army, a full bird colonal.
Full bird. Right. Now,
right.
For those of you civilians out there who don't know, what does that mean? If you were to put that into management context, that's like a senior vice president, because it's one rank below general. Okay. General is when you get into the executive level. So, and I think another thing that we need to stress here, when you have a pretty much exclusively special ops background. When you take that into consideration, your rank is right up there. There's very few that I know from a special ops area that actually get above the rank of captain on a U.S. Army level. Okay, so we really have the benefit of talking to somebody who understands large systems, the military itself, and special teams. Okay. Now, we've had a preliminary talk. This is an ongoing thing that I keep mentioning. I have this concept that most large organizations have copied the organizational structure of the military to be able to compete on an open market. Okay, so they have this mentality: more soldiers is better, more hardware is better, more divisions is better, right? And what they use to manage this large organizations is classical functional line organizations. Okay, very similar to the military. So if something is of essence to the military, you create a branch or division for it, right?
Right.
What would be examples in the Navy for different divisions that you have? Although the Navy itself is a big division, right? It has its naval mission. But what are some other branches of the Navy that kind of are indicative of this segmentation?
Well, I'd say pretty much anywhere in the Navy that's not considered special operations.
Yeah.
So EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, surface warfare, combatant crewmen, those are our boat guys, NSW, naval special warfare, that's the SEAL teams. Yeah. Those are all considered special operations. So those are a very small part, about 1% of the overall Navy structure. The vast majority of the Navy, Mark, is, built around the model of like a carrier battle group.
Yeah.
And, that's the more traditional, what we would consider conventional military model, very hierarchy based.
So we're talking about two different cultures, and I had written you some of my comments, and you'd actually written a question in here, which I thought was great. I wrote one of the questions I wrote, special ops, that if we were going to put it into a project context, the Navy itself is kind of like a large corporation,
right?
that has that culture, that standard operating procedures, command obey, hurry up and wait, all those different principles, right? Don't step on your commanding officer's toes. There's a certain decorum of how you interact with one another. And a command is a command. And special ops have a culture and nature of themselves to be able to facilitate the benefits that they're supposed to do. And I often say, if we were going to compare, project management teams are like, and not because I'm trying to do any steal any valor from anybody, but in the very nature of their orientation of their culture, project teams are very much like special ops teams. Okay, although I think special ops teams get more respect than project management teams often do. We're often the unwanted stepchildren of the organization. And I want to hear whether you guys, I don't think SEAL teams are, but maybe some of the other special ops sometimes are treated like stepchildren as well. But before we get into all this wonderful discussion about what are the similarities and what lessons learned can we get from your background. And by the way, I also want to point out, we're going to talk a little bit about your professional background. You're a senior manager at a large organization as well, right? Kaatsu?
Yeah, but I would say it's actually a very small organization covering a lot of ground. But yeah, we can get into that.
Okay, so we'll talk about that as well. But before we do, one of the things I'm always a big fan of is, and that's why we take time in our podcast. I want to get to know the person. Okay, we've talked a little bit in the past, but I also want the listeners to get an idea who is John, because you have a varied and interesting background. I always call it the passion journey. So let's start off. Where did you start off? Where did you study? You actually started off not in the Navy, right? You started off at the Air Force Academy. You can go even before that if you want to tell us where you're from.
I grew up in Northern California. My dad was Air Force.
Okay.
I was actually born in Lackland Air Force Base in Texas.
So were you an Air Force brat?
Yeah, but my dad, he ended up going into the reserve. So during the Vietnam era, he was active duty.
Okay.
Once he was done with that, as a junior officer, he left the Air Force and very quickly missed the camaraderie. In the business world, he quickly learned that it's not, as you well know, it's
not that band of brothers, right?
Yeah, not necessarily.
Yeah.
And he tried to get back into the Air Force, and Vietnam was drawing down.
Yeah.
And so he got a lot of no thank yous. Eventually was let back in the reserve component of the Air Force, and continued on to do 30 years and made it to a full bird colonel in the Air Force.
Very, very cool.
But that was my exposure to the military growing up. I grew up in Northern California, so it's kind of considered East Bay, San Francisco. So Walnut Creek, Pleasant Hill, Concord, those areas. And went to high school as a swimmer, played a little basketball, saw Top Gun in 1980.
That movie has done so much for the Navy.
Was that 86 or 87?
Yeah, I think it was.
And you want to talk about a crazy recruiting film. I saw that with all my buddies, and of course, everybody wanted to go in the Navy and fly fighter jets and fly F-14s and pretend they were Tom Cruise and stuff. So that, between my father being in Air Force Reserves at the time.
Okay, John, you've frozen up. Hold on. Hold on. John. There you are. Now you're back.
Did we
lost
that
you
on
just
my
shortly.
end, you think?
What's that?
Was that on my end, you think?
Oh, hold on. Let me double check here.
I'm showing, I got a good signal here.
Hold on. Let me double check mine real quick.
Okay.
We didn't lose anything. It's just, we didn't. Hold on. No, I'm good. It was just a glitch. I have a great download and upload thing right now. Good. It was just a glitch. Yeah. So you left off with father went into the. Now you were talking about Top Gun and how that motivated you. So you didn't mention the Air Force Academy, but you were leading up to that.
Yeah. So I was interested in going into the Navy.
Okay.
So I applied to the Naval Academy and I got turned down.
Okay.
And I applied to the Air Force Academy and they kind of laughed at my grades, but the swim coach, I was not the best. I was not the best student. I wasn't a bad student in high school, but I wasn't a top tier stellar student athlete. I was an athlete.
Well, the best of us weren't. The best of us weren't. There's lots of statistics that show that the grade A students are not the overflyers usually. But although it's give them credit where credit is due. So you got into the Air Force Academy.
So the coach helped me get in. Mm-hmm. So he's like, well, your ACT and your SATs aren't good enough, but if we take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and we work some magic, maybe we can get you in.
Okay.
So I ended up getting in. Did all 4 years, graduated from there. But my junior year, so this was in 91, early 91. So Bush 41.
Yeah. So actually, when the military was kind of tapering down, because I remember when I was in RTC, it was 84, 86, and when I came back in 80, I took a break from college for 2 years. When I came back, everybody was kind of downsizing, and it was kind of difficult to get a commission.
Yeah, and we were feeling a little bit of that still in the late 80s, early 90s, because they came out to us and they told the cadet wing, they said, if you're not in the top third of your graduating class, you're not going to go to UPT, undergraduate pilot training. We'll have you go do something else, maintenance officer, missile officer, whatever other jobs. Yeah. Well, and Mark, I was definitely not in the top third of my class.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I also don't see you doing a classical maintenance job. No discredit all those branches that are for support. God bless you. We wouldn't be able to, but I don't see you being the type that would want to do necessarily quartermaster or any of that other kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing against that. It's just not what I wanted to do. I came in the Air Force to fly, and I was being told that you're going to be banked for at least a year if that's what you want to do, and we're going to go put you in other jobs. So I called my dad, and I called Mike. My mentor growing up was a guy named Mike Troy. I'm actually looking at a picture of him right now on the cover of Sports Illustrated in 1960. He was double gold medalist in the Rome Summer Olympics in the 200-meter fly and in one of the relays, world record holder. And he was my swim coach growing up. And he had spent time in the SEAL teams during Vietnam.
Okay. I believe that's a whole different era.
Oh my gosh. He was one of the most motivating gentlemen I've ever met in my life. He would sit us down before a hard Saturday morning workout. But
this guy was a Navy SEAL even before Dick Marchenko came around, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So these are OGs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. If you think about it, the Olympics were in 1960, and it was after that he went into the Navy. Wow. So at the very beginning of Vietnam, he was in the mix and did three tours over there. Yeah. So incredible man. Unfortunately he's no longer with us. Yeah. But I remember calling Mike from our squadron. We had one phone, one CQ phone in the squadron bay there. And I called him up and I was like, hey, Mike, it doesn't look like I'm going to get to fly. What do you think I should do? And he said, quit the freaking Air Force, join the Navy, and go into SEAL teams.
I am dying to hear how you made that happen.
Well, I said, Mike, I'm at the Air Force Academy. I'm not the Navy. In case you forgot, I'm at the Air Force Academy. And Mike was just like, I don't know. I'm pretty sure there's a way to do it. I've heard of people doing it in the past. And so I started looking into it, and he was right. We had a liaison officer at the Air Force Academy who taught some joint combined warfare type classes, professional military studies. But he also was responsible for inter-service transfers. And every year there was always one or two that would do it. And I had no idea. I didn't know that. It was kind of kept under wraps. So that's what I did. I put all the paperwork out. When you're a cadet and you tell the Air Force Academy that you're leaving the Air Force to go into another service, they're not happy about that. So you have to go and sit at a table.
Did you have a walk of shame?
Oh my God. Yeah. I had to sit at this table, and it was all active duty, lieutenant colonels, colonels, and a general, the brigadier general, the commandant of cadets at the end of the table, all wanting to know who the hell I thought I was to waste the taxpayers' monies for 4 years of education to go into the Navy. And just
out of curiosity, I know that most of the cadets that go to West Point, which is the U.S. Army Academy, the focus there is primarily engineering. What's the focus at the Air Force Academy? I guess you can pick your major, but what's the predominant major there?
It's almost all engineering degrees. Okay. So everything from fluid dynamics to aeronautical.
So everything that relates to anything that has to do with aeronautics.
Yeah. And building of airfields. Yeah. So you had to have that.
Yeah, so it's similar. It's similar, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so all the service academies are science based. Yeah. It's kind of STEM. Everything with them is STEM with few exceptions.
Okay. Now, when you talk to your mentor about transferring, did he have a very distinct idea of where you were going? I mean, was special ops, or were you looking to go on a ship? What was your motivation or thought process there?
Well, Mike, my mentor, he suggested going into the SEAL teams.
Oh, so he had you earmarked.
Yeah,
good.
Yeah, he thought it would be a good fit, and then I personally was like, oh my gosh, what little I know about that training, I'm not sure I can make it. Yeah. That's what I had in my head as an Air Force Academy guy.
Yeah, I'm sure that must be intimidating.
Yeah, it was, but the Navy gave me orders to class 186, and about 3 days before graduation, they reached out in message traffic because there were actually 4 of us trying to go into the SEAL teams from that 92 graduating class. And they came out with a message traffic saying, hey, instead of 4, you guys are allowed to send 2.
Ooh, so you were in competition, yeah.
I was uninvited to BUDS training, basic underwater demolition school. And I had to go into a different part of the Navy, and I was told, hey, just keep trying. You can get in eventually.
That's one great thing I love about the military is this. There is a certain exclusivity to it, but it's also very inclusive. Everybody gets a chance, and it makes no difference what your background is. The game ain't over until the fat lady sings. If you show ambitions, it's almost to your credit if you don't give up on something.
Yeah, and I didn't realize how valuable that trait was going to be because it took me. I submitted 6 packages to go to BUDS training, and 6 times I was turned down.
Were you doing active duty then with the Navy already?
Yeah, I was on a salvage boat. I was a hard hat diver and salvage diver, dive officer, and then driving the salvage ship. So I was an officer of the deck. I was a damage control assistant. I was a supply officer, and I was a BDO, basic dive officer. So I was a dive officer on the ship.
Yeah, and the diving aspect you learned in the service.
Yes, they sent me to hard hat diving school, salvage school, and taught me how to do all of that. Wow.
Which is actually a good precursor to what you needed later. I mean, it doesn't translate 100%, but it does. It's kind of leading in that direction. It's a form of specialty, high level specialty that probably gives you some respect when you come into BUDS.
Yeah. I didn't realize it at the time. I was kind of angry around the whole scenario, but I look back on it now, and everything happens for a reason, right? Yeah. Having that time in the regular Navy and in the diving Navy and driving ships and understanding how the big Navy really works, and bringing that knowledge into special operations. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times that helped me. Because on my uniform, I wore Trident, but below the Trident, instead of jump wings, I wore my SWO pin, my surface warfare officer pin. So when I would go into a meeting, or if I was going into a scenario where I had to convince a senior officer that we would be the force of choice, if the senior officer was a carrier battle group or a Marine Expeditionary Unit senior officer, as soon as they see that SWO pin, you're like part of their club.
I wish
it really helps.
I hope that the listeners understand this. This resonates with me completely, because that is, with my limited military exposure, was really limited. This is something that I've always realized, and also in my business transactions. When you're in trouble, you want special forces, in whatever format it might be, right? If you're in trouble in a company, you want a project manager who's crazy enough to take an impossible mission, kind of the Dirty Dozen thing.
Absolutely.
But I do find, and very few people are willing to talk about it in the business world, but one of my favorite stories I love to tell is I once was working with a telecom company who spent literally millions training their whole staff in project management concepts and standards and framework. And they really spent millions over 7 different countries. And they even had the title of senior portfolio manager, which means that it was basically the umbrella organization for all the projects. And they literally, very few companies have a title like this. So I thought, wow, these guys are really advanced. And this portfolio manager, during one of the coffee breaks, and they had a meeting with the executive level and the C level, and he walked up to the CEO, who was a very well-known person, walked up to him during the coffee break and said, sir, I'd like to talk to you about, some of the operational aspects of project management. And he looked at him. He was just making his own coffee. He looked at him kind of disgustedly. And I was there when it was, and he says, you know what, leave me out of that operational crap. I'm not interested. So when I did my interview with my colonel and we talked about special ops, he opened up to it, but he also closed down right away, because he started saying, yeah, but you always have to watch out for special ops. They go rogue and they're uncontrollable, and then you can't reintegrate them into the large organization. But what you're saying is worth gold, because, and I think I'm going to say this differently. I think we often struggle to find our career, and I often think our career finds us.
Yeah,
you learn the things that you
100%.
should, and I think it made a huge difference. I would agree with you, although I wasn't that intimately familiar with your background. I think the very fact, and this is also for product, if you can talk the language of executives, because they speak a different language, if you can talk, general staff language, and they recognize you for understanding their pain points, I think you have a whole different platform to talk to. So that's very interesting that you say that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it would apply in a lot of aspects outside the military too. If you're a consultant and you have no background, real background,
if you've never
in
done
what
it
is that organization's doing, you're not going to have those guys respect coming out in the door. If you spent time in that organization walking in the door, now you're a little bit more of a known commodity.
Because it is the dominant culture. It is the power base of the organization. And in reality, special ops and project teams, they serve a larger sphere. So what was your experience when you were in the classical military? Let's put it that way. What did you see that you liked? What did you see that you didn't like so much?
Well, first of all, that life is very, very difficult. And, I think there's this misnomer out there that living and working in special operations is very difficult. I would agree to some aspects, the assessment and selection for all the services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, all the special operations assessment selection. It's physically difficult. It's mentally difficult. But the value of spending time in the conventional military is so much of what happens in big Navy, in my case, is so much more difficult to get things done
Yes.
than in special operations.
Yes.
When you have a small niche group with, I'll just call it top cover, senior top cover.
Which is a topic
hey,
we
look,
need to deep dive on, because most project teams don't have top cover. And that's where I think we can learn a lot from the military.
It's super important. And remind me, we'll come back to commander's intent and all that.
Yeah.
But having the experience, seeing how hard it was to get things done in the big Navy, I think it served me well.
Yeah. Okay. So you applied how many times before they took you?
6.
Good for you.
Every 6 months.
A lot of people say, "Oh wow, I can't believe it took you that long," But I think that's hats off to you that you were tenacious. So I think that probably didn't pass them by either. So 6th time you get the okay. What was your immediate reaction? Were you excited?
Yeah, I was excited, but I was nervous because I had been promoted twice at that point, and so I was a full lieutenant in 03, like an Army captain.
Yeah,
going to Buds as an older guy, and I mean not old, but I was definitely not.
No, I know what you're talking about.
Young,
military, that's
freshly, old. I had not just been commissioned, and it was made crystal clear to me the day I came across the quarterdeck at Buds that we don't want lieutenants as new guys in the SEAL teams. We want lieutenants to already have 1, 2, or 3 platoons under their belt and be platoon OICs, or officers in charge. So out of the gate, I was behind the power curve. I was the class officer for class 213.
Okay.
So you can see 186 is where I had the orders, and 213 is where I finally got to go to Bud. So there's a long time there. But I think this is the funny thing. If you look at corporate structures, everybody's always focused on white collar jobs and getting the big power names. And if you look at the military, there's lots of value and honor in being enlisted or being an NCO. I totally value those positions, but if you come from a military background, then you kind of have this drive towards becoming an officer. And if I can think of all my friends who went to the military, they all were focused on how far can we get ahead. But I would almost say that in a special ops, I think very few people understand it. If you look at the big names that are out there, that we know. I wrote down some of the ones I could remember. Don Shipley, Jesse Ventura was a Navy SEAL, right? Joko Willink, which I love to listen to. He's got some interesting. I think David Goggins, Marcus Luttrell, Sean Ryan, Andy Stump. The only one that I could find on the list, but I haven't heard a lot from him lately, is Leif Babin. Leif Babin.
Leif is the only one who's actually an officer of those, which gives you an indication. If you look at the lore and the kind of the mystique that's around Navy SEALs, most of them are around NCOs, right? So you rarely hear about an officer in a SEAL setting.
Yeah, and Jocko was an officer too. And
I didn't know that.
Reasons,
okay.
Well, because he was prior enlisted.
Okay.
So Jocko and I were at Team 2 together, but once he got commissioned, the Navy switched coasts and pushed him out to the East Coast.
Yeah. I don't know him, but what I've seen a lot of footage on him. He strikes me as one of those guys that I guess, does the Navy have a similar program like OCS?
Yes. Yeah. Commissioning
Officers
program.
Candidate School.
Couple different commissioning programs.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's what he did. Yeah. Yeah. That's
so
what
you had a hard time getting in. Then they told you right off the bat, we don't want you. I always love that, right? But they made you head of your class.
In fairness, they tell everyone that.
Yeah. So how everybody wants to know, how was Buds?
So this is always a fun conversation because for me, Buds was about the most fun I had in the Navy.
I love that you're saying that.
Yeah.
So you have a freakish nature.
It's tough. It's tough physically. We lost 80% of our class. I think we graduated with 31, and of those,
out of 100,
those were not all originals. Some of those rolled in from from other classes.
Yeah.
But we started with like 170, 180 or something like that. And so you lose a lot of guys, but as training goes on, you become really, really close with all the guys in your class. And when
now,
we graduated,
most of the people in your class were enlisted or NCOs,
Yep.
right? How do they how? Because in the military we've got this classical. You're supposed to keep a certain distance, right? You have the officer's credo. Familiarity breeds contempt, right? But you're in the thick of things. You gotta create a bond. You can't be extra, right?
You cannot. First of all, you can't make it through buds on your own.
Yeah.
But you also can't make it through this kind of classical vision of an officer being over everyone and telling everyone what to do, and it's my way or the highway. If
Command
you
obey,
try to operate
because I got cookies, you need to
right. Yeah, you try to do that at Buds or anywhere in the SEAL teams, and you will be gone.
Yeah,
you will be gone. What you could be the best athlete in the class, but as soon as you start showing individualism and not working as a team and not helping out your brothers, the instructors, if they want you gone, they'll get rid of you.
We're going to underline this part. There's going to be a reel on this. It's going to be one of our short reels because if we're going to go back to this concept that, you went through the classical military and then you went to special ops and there's a change of culture, right? You did in the original culture, it was, you could be familiar to a certain extent with your enlisted, but there was always a certain required distance, decorum that you had to uphold. And in special ops, and if we're going to say that special ops are similar to project teams, I think this is really important for project managers also to learn. If you want to, your project management, just like SEALs team, it's not something you can do by yourself. You can't lift the boat by yourself, to quote David, right? You can't lift the logs by yourself. And if you think you're fancy, if you think you're special, if you think you're better than somebody else, you're just screwing yourself, right?
Yeah, and you can't make it through by yourself. You got to earn the trust of the guys in the class.
Yeah.
And
was that difficult?
I think it's really difficult to earn trust sometimes if you're in a position of authority. Mm-hmm. And but once you have it, you can achieve about anything.
So if you overcome it, it's to your advantage.
Yeah. Once you've earned a trust, especially if you're working with a small group of like-minded individuals, and you have the trust going both ways.
Was there any suspicion from your class towards you because of your rank?
You kind of, with the exception of certain things that, when you're doing your musters, when you're leading the class to go to point A or to point B. I mean, it's obvious when you're doing that who the officers are. Mm-hmm. But the day in and day out training evolutions, there's no O, there's no E. It's you do it together with your boat team, and you help each other out, and you work together as a small team, lifting each other up and helping each other. And that's why I'm excited to have this conversation about small project teams and how valuable they can be to an organization. Because,
we're going to deep dive on that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you another simple question. Your instructors, primarily E's, enlisted, and NCOs, or officers as well?
So you go through 3 phases of training. First phase, second phase, third phase. Each phase has a phase officer. One officer. All the instructors are enlisted guys. Okay. Under that phase.
Do they have fun with you?
Oh yeah, they have a lot of fun with you, especially when you're coming from the fleet and you're maybe not in as good a shape as you should be.
How good of a shape were you?
Well, I was a swimmer, so I did fine in the water revolutions, but I really struggled with those soft sand runs, man. Oh my goodness.
But you didn't have to cycle, right?
No.
So you made it through
swimming,
which is running. That's saying a lot.
Yeah, and you just got to dig deep. And occasionally there was a thing called the goon squad. If you weren't running fast enough, you'd get gooned in back of the class. And I think the instructors understood, you have all shapes and sizes in the teams. You have tall, skinny, fat, you got maybe not fat, but you got all shapes and sizes.
Yeah, we call it dad bods.
Yeah. And even if you had a hard time keeping up with the runs, or if you had a hard time keeping up with the swims, the instructors they'd watch you closely. And if they saw that fire and they saw that drive, we had a guy in our class. I don't think we ever had a run, big guy. I don't think we ever had a run that he was not gooned. So goon meaning the class is running with the instructors, and the ones that are straggling in the back, instructors will grab them and go have special time with them. And it sucks.
The gig pit, they call it at airborne school, right?
Same idea. And a lot of those guys would quit.
Yeah.
But if you had a guy that was happening to over and over again, and he never quit, as a matter of fact, he came out of it.
Oh, they love those people, yeah.
Fired up. Yeah, the instructors love that. So it wasn't about being the best, the fastest, or whatever. It's just about that idea of never quitting when things start getting tough.
That's also something that translates completely into private industry. I'll double down on that question, because a lot of people want to know. I mean, it's easy, sitting on your couch to contemplate whether you'd ever be able to make it through that. I don't think you'd ever know until you're there. But what do you think were the qualities of the people that made it through? What qualities were they looking for?
Well, that's what made it so fun, was the people that end up making it through Hell Week, that make it all the way through the first phase. Once you have that core of people that's finished the first third of training, with a few exceptions, those are people you're going to be with for the rest of training. And they're just quality teammates. There's no individuals. All the individuals are gone by that time.
Egos are gone.
Pardon?
Egos are gone.
Oh, yeah.
Well, maybe not the positive ego of I want to achieve, but this counterproductive I thing. I got to
Yeah, it's all about teammates. It's all about team. It's all about helping each other out. And nobody's immune from it. Everybody had points in first phase where they were failing in some respect. And having those guys on your left and right to help lift you up, you create this bond. You might not be friends with all of them, but it's an incredible bond that's very powerful. And that is what makes the training so special. And you come out of that, and when you're all done with that, all that training, you feel like you can achieve about anything. You really do. As long as you're surrounded with the right
You're talking people. About something that I think private industry can only dream of. There's some companies that have a lore about them. For example, many decades ago, IBM and some of the big telephone companies had this think blue. Everybody in the family would work for the same company, and there was a lore about it. But I think this is something that private industry should look at more and more, especially when resources become harder. Good resources are harder to attain and keep. There's something about the military, and the military is not an easy lifestyle, as you said. They have something in their culture that enables them to create an emotional bond to their job and primarily to the people that they work with, people that might come from completely diverse backgrounds who would normally maybe not even go for a beer together, become the closest of mates. It's this band of brothers is, and I hear it over and over again. So
adversity, sharing adversity.
Yeah. So let me ask you: could you tell who? Was it easy to identify the people that wouldn't last?
No, not for me.
Okay.
I mean, we had a guy that was he was arena football, just total
Jock.
stud.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a monster. A guy get on the pull-up bar and he could go forever, right?
Yeah.
And he was a big guy.
Yeah.
And he was a good runner and he was decent in the water. And, physically, he was a specimen, right?
Yeah.
Essentially a pro athlete going into training. And everybody thought that he'd make it through and he'd
the
crush
poster
it.
child.
Yeah. And then on the first night of Hell Week, the first time that we
this
were
is still in the first
water,
segment.
Yeah, this is I think Hell Week. I'm not sure where it is now, but for us, I think it was week 3 of first phase. And on the first night of Hell Week, he was gone.
Cold water.
He was gone.
Cold water will take the will out of
you. Cold, wet, miserable.
Yeah.
But when the instructors were standing over him saying, "Yep, this is what it's going to be for the next 6 days, nonstop," he just something clicked, and he was like, "I'm gone." Right. And when you see that, when you see people that your expectations are up here for them, but maybe their psychological makeup is different, and they end up quitting, and deciding it's not for them. And it's, as you go through that training, it's a lot of people get exposed to things and they start getting uncomfortable with what it is they're going to be doing. And once they really realize what's involved, not just in training, but after training, when you're working in the teams, a lot of them leave. And we don't hold it against them, because a lot of those guys leave naval special warfare and they go into other branches of the Navy and absolutely crush it. Absolutely crush it. So
you got to want that lifestyle too,
Yeah, well, there's a respect of anybody that steps through that front door. We all respect each other, and realize it's not for everybody.
Did you ever come close to ringing the bell?
I did not, and I'm not saying that to like beat my chest or anything.
No.
It was. And everybody has a different perspective of what it takes to make it through something like that. For me, it was just having this mindset that I might get hurt. I might get hurt bad. I might get medically rolled or medically disenrolled or pulled out of training. But no matter what, I am not going to go ring that bell.
You alluded to something beforehand, and it didn't pass me by, and I wanted to pick up on it. You said a lot of people think, buds, that's gotta suck, but you had fun, which is almost a perverted thing to say. But I think I know what you're talking about. What was it where you felt comfortable? Were you comfortable with the environment of adversity?
Yeah, well, not by myself though. I mean, any of those things at Buds, if you had done that to me by myself, that's a whole different conversation. But when you're with these guys, and every day, every hour, every minute, you're getting tighter and tighter with these guys, and you're all going through that adversity together, that is incredible. And I thought it was fun. I thought it was fun, because in the back of your mind, no matter how bad it gets, it is just training. It is just training. And I'm not saying it was easy, but I'm saying it was fun, because later on in my career, when we had to do really hard things, it definitely was not fun. But that prepares you for things you have to do in the future.
A friend of mine
sharing those experiences.
A friend of mine who's also a project management expert once wrote a book on the emotional toll that projects takes on one, especially in dynamic markets with disruptive technology and all that kind of stuff. We use the acronym VUCA, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It could be a military term, but she coined the term what's called the permanent state of emergency. And this is something that I've experienced a little bit in my little bit of exposure to the military, and also Boy Scouts, and then it carried over to my work world. There are certain personalities that understand that life's a game, and this adversity, although it would be, I agree with you, is personally uncomfortable. But if you look at the big picture and that you're part of something bigger than you, I think if you can focus on that thing, it makes for a good spec ops person or a good project manager. Although I want to be careful when we're comparing these two. I don't want to, in any form or fashion, pretend like a project manager has the same mental, physical fortitude that a spec op person. But there is a little bit of a parallel also from a psychological perspective. So you said there were 3 levels of buds. What were the 3? The first.
So the first phase is where you lose most of the guys, but you also learn how to do all the physical training that you do with the teams, and beach reconnaissance, like old school beach reconnaissance, back in the World War II days. That's the type of stuff you do at Buds. And then you go into second phase, and that's dive phase. Okay. So underwater mobility.
I don't know if it's true, but I've heard there's a part where they dump you in a pool with a weight on you, and you tie your hands and feet, and you have to
drown proof, and you do all that stuff in first phase.
Okay. So second phase is more technical diving and stuff like that.
Yeah, a little more technical, but if guys want to get rid of you in second phase, they definitely can do that during the pool phases. Yeah. But you learn open circuit diving, closed circuit diving, so the bubbleless diving rigs, and you learn how to do ship attack, which is one of our niche missions in the teams. And then you go into third phase, and that's land warfare. Go out to San Clemente. You live out on the island. You learn about all the primary weapons in the inventory. You learn about patrolling, doing over the beach type of missions, insertion, extraction methods, and learning the basic standard operating procedures, the SOPs that are
standards. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to learn them at some point.
You got to learn the basics.
And you come back from that, and then they do it a little bit differently now. They roll the students into another whole 6-month long advanced training.
Yeah, because there's different tiers in the SEALs as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Depending on what team
the way
you're
it worked back when I went through, we would go to a team before being given our bird, the trident, like you see behind me on the wall. Before you were able to put that.
Is it called the Budweiser? Is that the nickname for it?
Yeah, that's the nickname. Yep. You remember that from Kurt's dad, right?
Yeah.
But you'd be a new guy at the team for 6 months to a year, kind of in a probationary status. And this isn't how it is now, but this is how it was when I went through. And the team basically watched you for 6 months to a year, and you would be in the platoon, and the platoon would kind of work with the command to let the command know whether or not they thought you were good or not.
Whether you jog.
And so you had to prove you might have already proved yourself at Buds, but you had to prove yourself all over again inside the SEAL team.
And you had to be, you weren't just being judged by officers, you were being judged by enlisted people, and also by NCOs, right? So that's an interesting aspect as well.
All the leadership team, majority enlisted, and warrant officers.
Was your role different when you got your emblem? Was it different than enlisted, or were you kind of lumped in with them until you when did the nature of you being an officer kind of kick in?
Well, they put me in a AOIC position, so that's assistant officer in charge.
Okay,
but you're still considered a new guy. Yeah. So you still have a ton to learn, but you're helping the OIC with fitness reports, with just standard paperwork that any military organization has to deal with. So all that standard platoon level, it's about 16 guys. All that paperwork fell mostly on the 2 officers in the platoon. But you were a new guy, and you had a ton to learn. I had a ton to learn. And that was, I think I learned more as a new guy in my first platoon than I did in all my previous time in the Navy.
Yeah. Let's talk about something that I'm familiar with, and I think some private industry is familiar with, but it's not. I think what I'm talking about is this concept again of these three different tiers. The enlisted, which is also NCOs, the role of an NCO, which is a leadership role, but maybe a lower, it is a lower rank one, but still essential to the health of an organization. Then you have the officer level, right? For those of the listeners that are listening and don't understand what an NCO is, what kind of analogies or how would you describe the responsibility? What's the responsibility? What role does an officer have to the organization? What role does an NCO have, and what are the enlisted do?
So the analogy I'd use is the chief in a SEAL platoon has the vast majority of the operational and tactical.
Now, a chief is NCO,
experience. Right? That's an NCO. That's an E7.
That's a high level,
Navy,
like
Navy chief.
E7, E8, or something like that.
E7. A couple of them E8s, or they promote the E8s, but every platoon's got a platoon chief, and that is the vast majority of the experience in the platoon should be the platoon chief. So that's
he's basically
the
heart of the team, isn't he? Or I don't know if that's the right analogy, but
I think he's the most important aspect of any platoon, task unit, or even at a great larger level at a whole SEAL team. We talk about this term called the triad. You have the commanding officer, you have the executive officer, and then you have the senior enlisted advisor or the command master chief. That of the triad, that's the one enlisted piece. In my opinion, that's the most important piece, because that is what takes all the sled dogs and takes all the, maybe call it the commander's guidance or the agenda that the senior officer has. Without that senior enlisted force to bring it all together, it can never work.
Now, I love the fact that you're pointing this out, and I think this is what's lacking in private industry. I think we have something that's close to NCOs in private industry, but I often refer to in project management, I call it it's the hidden workforce. It's those people that make things happen that nobody knows what they're doing. You know, they're kind of unseen, unheard of, and they're often unrecognized, because in private industry, everything's about getting that next manager title, right? Which is similar to being an officer, right? And I think very few organizations realize how important, how valuable and essential it is to have this liaison, this middle person that links strategic thinking and operational necessity to tactical. And I think you used a couple of good words in here. You talked about the strategic corporal and the commander's intent and tactical agility. These are some of the terminologies that you want to share what that means to us. And also maybe you could start off by telling us, although your chief officer is substantially lower than you in rank, you guys have ultimate respect for this person, right? You don't go bossing this guy around, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. The senior enlisted guy, and this holds true to any more military organization, conventional, special operations. Yeah. The senior enlisted advisor to the commander, if you don't have that relationship figured out, then that organization, whether we're talking about an aircraft carrier or we're talking about a small SEAL platoon, that organization is going to fail. Yeah. So yeah, I would agree with you. They have the junior guys have the utmost respect for the chief or the senior enlisted guy, and the officers, if they're good, have the utmost respect for that senior enlisted.
If they don't understand it, then they're missing. And I think this also kind of ties into something we should talk about from what's the operational value of that. If you're going to pass on a strategy or an objective, you got to be able to let these people off the leash. And if you're gonna respect them for their subject matter expertise, you need to let them off the leash. And just to add to this, I actually had the privilege of meeting a couple sergeant majors in my lifetime in the U.S. Army. I've seen sergeant majors lock majors up. I saw a major who was like he was out of his depth and was talking smack, and the sergeant major, not disrespectfully, but he let him know, listen, I'm talking, shut up.
Yeah.
You know?
There's a guy that I worked with in the teams. His name's Slab or Britt Slavinsky.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Medal of Honor recipient.
Oh, wow.
And he has this saying, and I think it covers down on so much. So you're never too junior to have the best idea in the room, and you're never too senior to be wrong. Never too junior to have the best idea in the room, and you're never too senior to be wrong.
That's
and
a great
Slab would
quote.
say that all the time, and there's so much that can be gleaned from that. In the teams, there's this thing called commander's intent,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea is to tell the more junior leaders in the organization what needs to be done, what the mission is. But a good leader will never tell that junior leadership how to do it.
Yeah. I swear, I knew that this was gonna trigger me in a positive way. I don't know how often in private industry, just to put it, a little bit about my world. Traditionally speaking, project managers are never senior managers. They're usually somewhere middle management, right? Mm-hmm. And it's usually a problem, an issue, an opportunity that's thrown over the fence by a senior manager who doesn't have the operational time or interest to deal with it, right? It's a thorn in their side or a way for them to gain an advantage for themselves or something like that. So there's a purpose behind it. And traditionally speaking, if a project fails, and just so you know, statistics, only 8% of large projects in private industry are in scope, in time, in budget, plus or minus 10%.
Time and budget. Okay.
8%.
Yeah, not many.
And about 20 to 30% of those projects, if they're large enough, are an existential threat to the organization if they fail.
Okay.
Now, if you look at small to large projects, the statistic, and don't believe in a statistic you didn't make up yourself, but it's a good guideline. They say so from small to large, 38 to 40% of all projects are on target, in time, in budget, plus or minus 10%.
Okay.
Now, those aren't. You think those are good numbers?
No.
Would you get by with that in the military?
No.
So let me ask you a question, and maybe you can answer it from a SEAL perspective. Who in a SEAL team gets held accountable if you fail mission?
The commander.
So the officer.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you know who gets held accountable in projects? The project manager. Okay. Now you might say, well, that's an officer too, but in many cases, you pick a project manager more by their bravery or stupidity to go for the impossible thing, right? Because they want to learn something. There's motivation. It's also this adrenaline kick that you want. But ultimately, and this is what annoys me in projects, often in projects, it's the person who has the least political say about where the project is going that is held accountable. This would be unheard of in spec ops, right? So it would be, for example, so I as a senior manager tell a project manager, I'm going to give you impossible objectives. I'm not going to give you enough money. I'm not going to give you full-time resources. I'm going to determine all the variables of success, and you're going to be stupid enough to take the blame if we fail. Could you imagine that? That wouldn't stand for a moment in the military, or?
No. In the military, the senior leader is the ultimate responsibility. Yeah.
So the buck stopped up top.
I mean, the example that I think resonates with a lot of people is you're the commanding officer of a ship. Your officer to deck is a senior lieutenant, and your senior lieutenant has a nav team and a bridge team, and you're downstairs and you're asleep, and the ship runs aground. The the officer, the deck, the senior lieutenant's not held accountable.
Not absolved. Yeah.
It's the commanders, it's the commanding officer's fault that ship ran aground. And the reason is, when you peel that onion back, all the way back to how that officer was trained on that ship, 99% of the time when a ship runs aground, it's avoidable. And it all starts from the top. So the senior leadership in that organization is not necessarily the person that pushed the button or on the ship turned the rudder the wrong way, but he or she does have ultimate responsibility. And I think that's important, because as a leader and as a commander, you have to train your organization, of course, but you have to create a level of trust in the organization. And I feel in a lot of cases, trust is more important than performance. If you have a small project team and you can't trust them, but they're the best in the business, do you really want them?
Yeah. I often say when I'm looking, I always say there's three criteria to pick the right resource. The obvious one, the academic answer, is to pick the best person, the subject matter expert. Okay. But in reality, it's not. Expertise is not the number one criteria. In reality, availability. Okay. Whoever's left over is usually the person who's assigned to the job. And I say better than those two options is the person who volunteers for it. I'd rather to have a junior person who says, I'm not sure whether I can do it, but I'm passionate about it. I want to give it a try. I much prefer that person. And that's part of also the military ethos, right? It's part of nothing happens in a military organization. You're not, the draft is thank heaven over, maybe we might need it in the future, but the military and its cultural is based upon, hey, listen, we're not forcing you to anything. We'll force you once you're in, but before you get in, you get to volunteer. How many times did you have to volunteer before you became a SEAL?
Well, I got turned down 6 times before I finally got in on the 7th time.
It's like it's
an all volunteer force.
And
right?
I think that quality is something that's really, really important when you're looking at your resources. And I think I absolutely agree with you. You don't just if you can get the best person and that person is a great person and fits into your team, God bless. But in absence of that, I'd rather have somebody who's volunteered and who's gung ho, right? Than who's who's kind of reluctantly, with an attitude going into your mission.
Well, the attitude piece is huge, Mark.
Yeah,
and I'm talking because bad attitude is just as contagious, if not more, than a good attitude.
Yeah,
and I've always thought of attitude with the people that you're working with. That's like a force multiplier, military term, but. If you have a small group of people with a great attitude and you take another group of people that are arguably better at what they do with a shitty attitude, I don't want them. I want this, because they're going to feed off each other.
How do you deal with bad attitude? It's something you can sniff out fairly quickly if you have experience.
That's where the chief comes. That's where the senior enlisted personnel come. That's where they really are valuable, because they've been around for so long, and they came up from an E0 all the way up to E8, 9.
You believe them when they say something.
Yeah, and they've all been there.
Yeah.
So when they have somebody in the organization that has and maybe it's a justifiably reason why he or she has a bad attitude. Maybe they're the victim of something that went wrong. Yeah. But all those people that came, in an organization, think of the guy that started in the mailroom and now he's like a VP in the organization. That people are going to listen to him or her because they've been there, and it's incredibly valuable, and it's a good way to help control bad attitudes in the team. But sometimes you just can't change people, and they got to go. You don't have to necessarily fire them, but you can move them.
Yeah. Let me get back to something you said beforehand, because I think there's some gold there as well. I think it's great that you say, hey, at the military we don't blame the wrong people, even if the commanding officer wasn't the one who actually pulled the trigger or did the thing that was the domino effect, the trigger, the risk trigger. They're still held accountable because that's their job. That's what their role is. What was your culture, your officer ethos, your approach to enabling good small teams? Because that's ultimately what you were managing, right? High-powered, high-performing small teams of specialists. What was your role? Because you have a different role. I'm sure you've been on lots of missions, and I don't want any details that you don't want to share. But it's not about I'm not looking for sensational stories here. But I mean, I want to kind of tap into, because if a project manager is listening to this, he says, okay, I have John's job. Okay, how do I need to see my responsibility? Because I might not be the one who's going to go out on the mission. Sometimes they go on a mission. I don't know exactly. But what is the role of an officer? What would be the role of a project manager when it comes to working with high-performing small teams?
Well, I think the goal of the officer or the senior member of the team is to guide that train and give some basic intent, and maybe most importantly, to empower the junior members of the team. I think it's there's not much worse than a team that's being run by a it's funny because I have visions of guys I've worked with.
Yeah, one usually does.
And you
can give every concept a name.
An example of a bad example.
Yeah.
So we've all worked for great guys, and we've all worked for guys that weren't. But there's value to both, right? Because when you work for this guy, you're learning what not to do, right? And we've all worked for people like that. And I think one of the most important things that the good leaders do, whether we're talking about the leader of a major organization or the leader of a small project team, I think one of the most important things they do is they empower everybody on the team, and they empower especially the most junior people on the team, because everybody in an organization has their own niche perspective of the world. And, I remember this, we had this one mission in Afghanistan, and it involved going to help out some guys that were in a surrounded scenario. And the best idea of the day came from a Boston National Guard firefighter who was on his guard time on this deployment. And he's like, well, why would we do that? I don't want to go into details, but brilliant. Why would we do that when we could use the ANP, the Afghan National Police, who always said they would help us and do this and this and this. And oh, by the way, Muhammad over there, he and I become good friends because we have tea every morning. And it was like, God, I would have never thought about that. And
oh my God.
That's so important that people feel they have the authority to speak up.
The concept that the best idea wins, and it doesn't make a difference from what rank that comes. I think
exactly.
That's by the way, we have an acronym for that in business. I don't know if you have it in the military. It's called a DAU, a DAU, called the dumbest assumed user. And that's not meant as disrespect. As a consultant,
I like that.
When people ask me what I am as a consultant, I'm saying I'm a dumbest assumed user. I'm the master dumbest assumed user. I never go into a company and acting like I know everything. I go in there and I ask all the stupid questions that nobody else dares to ask. Okay, which creates transparency, right?
So, I love it. I'm writing that down, Mark.
And letting. And by the way, we talked about this when we were prepping for this beforehand. There's on Netflix. There's a series on the origins of the SAS, and it's I think a lot of it's folklore, but some of the things they were looking for a hodgepodge of people that could think outside the box, and the number one premise was we don't just take commands. If you give us a command, the first responsibility you have is to ask all the stupid questions, because if you don't ask those stupid questions, we might not find out that what are the stupid elements that we need to get rid of in the overall mission, right? So that's worth gold. But you've been a little bit vague. I think, and by the way, I would give you credit to focus on letting people off the leash is definitely a responsibility of an officer. And I wish more private industry would understand what that means. Okay. If you're going to have a high power team, by the way, very few projects do this, make them full-time, give them whatever materials they need. I mean, you guys are famous for your toys, right? You get all the crazy toys you want. You decide what toys you want, and money is usually not that much of an issue, depending on the cycle. You let people off the leash. You let the lowest denominator decide if they have the best idea. So that's great. But I want to kind of go back to it. Let's go back, because you're being humble. There is an important role that you as an officer played. Okay, I could give some guesses. You're the liaison to the level above you, which is a liaison to the level above them, which is a liaison to the level above them. I mean, there's this classical pyramid. You have vision, mission, objectives, and then it goes down, and then you go then to the individual missions. There's a long path. So what were some of? I mean, you are essential. I mean, otherwise they wouldn't have you. It's not like we don't need officers, and it's not like we don't need project managers. So what are your primary jobs? Even if they don't sound as illustrious as jumping Halo out of the back of a Chinook or whatever, or what are those responsibilities?
I think the responsibility of an officer or a project manager, senior project manager, is to look up and out. The project managers or the officers that are always looking down and in, when you do that, you're basically communicating to your team you don't trust them.
Yeah.
You have to build that trust, because as an officer, I have to focus on this. I can't be focused on this. That's what I'm asking, John. What is that? The up and out is the everybody has a boss, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm an 05, if I'm a commander in Afghanistan, I have a boss. He's a one-star.
Are there things?
And then he has a boss.
Let me ask differently. Are there things that your team doesn't want to think about that they want you to answer?
Yeah, I think the overall strategy.
Yes.
So
what is the actual mission?
Is strategy.
What are the parameters of the mission? If we run into trouble, what do you want me to go left, or do you want me to go right? Right. So strategy. And so I think go ahead.
Well, I think everything that we do, we war game the heck out of it.
Yeah.
We look at branches and sequels. We look at if then. We look at if this and this go wrong, what is our primary, secondary, and usually tertiary options? And we go over it over and over again. Everyone on the team has to understand that, including the senior leader. But somebody on the team has to be answering the mail above and beyond and focused on the strategy of what that smaller team is part of. That takes a lot of mental energy.
Also the logistics. It's the big chessboard, right? I often say the difference between senior management and project management. Project managers and project teams have to be, this is a term we often use called, they have to be enamored they have to have attention to detail. All right?
Okay. Yeah.
And senior management has to have the big picture.
Yes.
So if I'm in a special ops team, I want to go on a mission, but I don't want to have to think about, do I have logistical background? What happens if I get in trouble? Who's picking me up afterwards? Where am I getting my lunch? Where do I get my refueling? Right? What happens if
all important questions?
Yeah. Well, if the doo-doo hits the fan, what do we do? Right? What are fallback plans? Right? These are things that your spec op team doesn't want to think about. They say, listen, I've got my specialty. I think General Patton once said it kind of succinctly. He said, you know what? Strategy is important, but overestimate. I mean, without strategy, you're going to lose. It says, but we also have to acknowledge as soon as the first bullet is fired, strategy goes out the window. And I think you referred to it as tactical agility, right? So what you have to provide as a cast of officers is a clear vision and mission and parameters and rules of engagement. What do you expect? What are the requirements of the outcome that you're looking for, right? But then have the leadership fortitude and ethos to say, listen, you're the one who's going to put your life on the line. We've trusted, we've trained you. We're going to give you, I think you referred to it as that tactical agility, right? We're going to give you the tactical agility to do what you need to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the leadership's job, in my opinion, is creating those lane lines that the organization has to stay in.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily the leader's job to define what takes place in between those lane lines.
Yeah.
So all those things that you mentioned that were logistics based type things that we would worry about inside a military organization, every single one of them is important, Mark, because if any single one of those doesn't happen, just as simple as water or food or the quick reaction force, or who in your organization is responsible for making sure the QRF
or also
knows where to go. Also that stuff.
Yeah. Also the coordination between what you call it, the not interagency, but the different branches of military.
Cross-functional teams. And
who's coordinating with the Marines? Who's talking, if you're out there with Delta, who's coordinating with them so you're not conflicting with one another, right? When do you work together, collaborative? So the high level decision making, you can't pass it on, and your team is not interested in those. I mean, they're interested, but they're not going to make those kind of decisions.
They just want to know it's being taken care of.
Yeah, and they also want to know that there's some sound thought that's gone into that. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
I actually read the book Extreme Leadership, and there's a couple things in there that I really like from your colleagues. And
Jacko.
Yeah, and one of the things he wrote in there, and it really resounded with me.
Great guy, by the way. By the way, just an incredible person.
Yeah. If I were to, I also like what he's doing now with the jeans company. I think that's a good patriotic thing. But one of the things I liked about his mentality is this, you're either part of the problem or part of the solution. I love the fact that there's a distribution of responsibility, but he says, you know what? I don't care what my rank is. If I'm in the game, I'm a player. I like that mentality. And he was talking about, what often happens in private industry is, we often feel handicapped because we've got this command obey culture where we're given parameters that basically make us fail, right? And then we have a tendency to complain about senior management. And I love what Jocko says. He says, you know what? Extreme ownership means if your senior management or your commanding officer makes the wrong decision, to ask yourself the question, what is my shared responsibility? Why is that officer making that decision? Did I not do a good enough job of explaining to them that we should be doing something else? That willingness and that courage to say, yes, sir, but I'm going to give you pushback. I thought that was a great aspect of his book. I like that very much because I think it's one-to-one. It can translate into real life.
Yeah, because sometimes the senior leader doesn't have the full picture.
Yeah.
And sometimes you in a project team, or in his case, in that book, in that task unit, he was a task unit commander. Yeah. He has awareness that senior leaders that he was working for might not have or definitely didn't have. So it's almost mandatory. You want somebody that if they know something that's going to run counter to that overall plan, you want somebody to have the courage to stand up and say, hey, look, that might not be the best route to go because of what we've seen with A, B, C, or D.
Now, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I want to tie into this. I want to continue on this leadership responsibility thing, because what I like about you as a sparring partner on this topic is you really moved up the ranks. I mean, to become a captain in spec ops says a lot about your career, right? So I think before that you had the title of commander, and you had different roles. I don't know. Do you take over a whole team, or how does that work?
Yeah, I did 2 commanding officer tours.
Are you allowed to tell me which teams it was? Just because I'm a nerd and I would love to know.
So Naval Special Warfare Unit 2, which was our forward deployed unit in Germany. Okay. And so we would have SEAL platoons come to us, and then we'd farm them out across Europe and Afghanistan, and in some cases, Africa. That was one CO tour, and the other was a tour in Afghanistan. So 12 months in Ghazni province, Afghanistan. Well,
thank you for your service. Now, I think this is also something that too few project managers understand, in the perspective of extreme ownership. I want to kind of tie into that again. Is their responsibility to get outside of their comfort zone and go to toe to toe with the level above them, right?
Yes.
You want to share? You want to share your feelings and thoughts about that?
That is smiling. You know what I'm talking about. That's one of the more difficult things that you have to do in an organization. Is everybody in an organization answers to somebody above them, with few exceptions, and that certainly is the case in the military. And sometimes you're given a military mission that, based on your local and historical perspective and local knowledge, that does not make sense, and it's going to get guys hurt or killed. And that the responsibility is on that leader's shoulders to make sure and educate the senior leader that's asking them to do something that might not make sense. And there's ways to do that, and there's definitely ways to not do that.
Any pieces of advice you'd like to share with us? Let us look into your magic box. You can put it in context of a story, maybe, if you want. Like, think of a situation where you had to go toe to toe with somebody with stars on their shoulders. Ultimately, I think one thing you learned, really, because you work your way up. I think one advantage that you have, and I think this is also a lesson learned for a project manager. You really worked your way, although you were an officer, you worked your way through the ranks, and you had that bond to those soldiers. And I think ultimately, if you have a commanding role, I think the number one burden that you carry on your shoulders is the ethical, moral, and also life responsibility that you have to look out for your team members. I think that must be an unfathomable a point of pressure, and of course, it's a political game, like in every organization. But going toe to toe with difficult decisions and maybe and giving pushback is part of your responsibility. Can you think of a particular situation without disclosing anything that you shouldn't disclose?
Yeah, without devolving too much, I'll just say there was this one thing we had to do in Afghanistan, and when we were wargaming the solution to what had to be done, one of the things we came up with 2 or 3 times was the vehicle and the personnel we were going to help. We might have to destroy that vehicle to get everyone out safely. We had the ability to kind of tow that vehicle out of there, but and we had some smart guys on our team. And they're like, hey, we might not be able to get that thing to move. And if that's the case, we should just BIP it, blow it in place. Yeah. And I said, okay, well, that's part of our mission planning. So when I go and I brief what we're doing that night, and the guy on the other side of the VTC, the video teleconference, and he's an Army colonel, and he's like, no, you're not doing that. And I'm like, well, we might have to. He's like, no, you're not leaving that there. You're not going to you're not going to destroy, there was the value, there was the crypto, the radios, you're not going to destroy that. You're going to get it out of there. And I said, sir, we might not be able to do that. And if that's the case, my recommendation is we blow it in place, take the crypto off, and it'll be useless to anybody. And then that quickly turned to a 1-star getting on the VTC. And it was interesting because in my, you know, I don't want to say blinders, but my perspective was, my goal was to go help these guys. We were going to use half of our team to go help them. It was turning into kind of a big thing. And we were going to use half of our guys to go get them and help them. And we might have to destroy it was called a RG-33. It's a mine resistance, ambush protected, big vehicle for moving people around, around the battlefield. Yeah. Protect them from IEDs. Yeah. And
those new jacked up vehicles that I saw.
Yeah, and it has this V bottom.
It looks like a monster.
So if you did get hit an IED,
diverts the blast.
It would diffuse a lot of the blast. I mean, you still could really get jacked up if it was a big enough blast, but it really helped a lot. I mean, the design saved so many lives.
Yeah, because those Hummers weren't doing the job.
Yeah, but they're so damn expensive. They're so damn expensive. So anyway, we kind of, the way we left it was the commander was not budging on this. And, I said, yes, sir, got it. And hung up, and I had to sit there and this gets into the senior leader, dilemmas that you're dealing with when you're leading organizations. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Let's really sit back and think about this. It's a thing. It's a vehicle.
It's
and we're
not
going to have
live.
60. We're going to have
they
60
don't have kids.
personnel.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to have 60 personnel, and there's 8 people on the ground. So we're going to have almost 70 personnel that are my responsibility. Yeah. And, I had to make a call, and I told Tim, and I told the guy, go ahead and prep the charges. We're bringing the charges with us. And, that word quickly made it back to leadership. And in no uncertain terms, I was told that I would be reporting in for, after the mission was over. As it turns out, we were able to get the vehicle out of there. We didn't have to blow it in place, but you have to have the fortitude and the foresight to say, I know where my priorities are. I mean, this is what we talked about this a little bit, but the concept of principle-based leadership, right? Yes, expensive materials, and you don't want to be, you don't want to blow things up just for the sake of blowing them up. But if you're going to sacrifice lives, you have to have the fortitude. You have to be able to have the backbone to give pushback. And I think private industry or military, that applies in both cases. Yeah, and it's hard to make that direct parallel to business, and that's why I hesitate. Well,
it's different. It's different consequences.
It's very, very, very different. But every project team is dealing with bottom line and dollar and cost overruns and everything that you were talking about at the beginning. And you got to make hard decisions sometimes for the best of the organization and the best of the project team. You got to take care of your guys, because sometimes the organization and I haven't done your job, Mark, so I don't know, but I would imagine
easier than yours.
Organizations, sometimes they're asking for near the impossible. And at some point you got to take a step back and take care of your people.
Yeah. You got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. Yeah. So, how long were you in for?
So the 4 years at the Air Force Academy didn't count.
Okay.
Which always blew me away. But 25 in the Navy.
So is it in the Navy the same as it is in the Army? It's usually the first cycle of retirement is 20, and then the next is 30.
Yep. You become eligible at 20. Now the military is kind of doing more of a 401k model. So if you get out at 19 years, you don't just have a goose egg. So they're changing that a little bit now.
Yeah. Okay. So you got out and you went into private industry. What was that like coming out?
That was a big wake up call. I mean, people tell you when you're getting ready to leave the military service, that, things are just so much different on the outside. The priorities are different. The missions are definitely different. and the interpersonal interactions, while still valuable, it's very different than anything you do in the military. People tell you that till they're blue in the face, but until you
don't believe it until you see it, right?
Yeah. But so it was eye-opening. The military tries to help you out with some transition assistance type things. But at the end of the day, I think it's hard in different ways for everyone.
Did you do your master's degree before you got out, or did you do a master's degree afterwards? Because the military often offers that to their senior officers.
I did it before I got. I did it in Monterey in 2004.
What did you do?
Naval Postgraduate School. They had a master's of science. It was called a SOLIC, Special Operations Low Intensity Conflict. Okay. So I did the SOLIC program, which was great for the military, great perspective, great learning opportunities. But SOLIC didn't really help
prepare you for the real world
outside. Like, oh, you got a master of science. What did you study?
Well, we talked about this beforehand. I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about the company you work for, right? And tell us a little bit about what your position is and what your company does, because I think one of your passions is not just to be out in the world to make money, which is part of it, but you still your heart is still in the right place. You also are looking for things that are valuable, and you work for this company Kaatsu. So tell us a little bit about your role there and what Kaatsu is.
Kaatsu started in Japan, and I'll go into the company a little bit here, but I think everybody that comes out of the military, whether you realize it in the first couple of days, or some people it takes a year or two to figure it out, once you've spent a career in service, it's very hard, it's very difficult to go into an industry that is not in some way service-based. So to go into an industry that's all about the bottom line and about making a couple dollars, if that's all the organization stands for, and a lot of guys go into that, but pretty quickly you miss
if
what,
they lack
what you
a
were
purpose
doing.
base.
Yeah. If your why is not for me, it was a purpose that was in service in some way, shape, or form. So before I got out, I had 12 orthopedic surgeries.
So you were wrecked.
The last two surgeries I had, I was at Special Operations Command headquarters in Tampa. I'm talking to you in St. Petersburg, Florida. I retired out of SOCOM headquarters at MacDill Air Force Base, which is just across the bay in Tampa. And so the last two surgeries I had, one was a knee replacement, and one was a rotator cuff anchor that I tore a rotator cuff off. And the PTs used this device on me, and it was called Kaatsu, and it helped with my rehab. So that shoulder injury, exact same shoulder injury I'd had when I was 6 years younger in the teams. And when I had that anchor put in, so I fully tore off the supraspinatus rotator cuff, and then they anchor it back in place, right? Well, the first time I had that done, it was just under 11 months to full range of motion. Yeah,
shoulders
range of motion,
is
strength,
a
agility.
pain to get rehabbed.
Oh man, it sucked. And then when I had the exact same injury happen again, kind of embarrassing. I was body surfing, but tore my shoulder back.
No, it was a mission.
So I had to get it fixed. It wasn't a mission, right? It was, but so the guys they did the exact same surgery, did the exact same rehab, but what they said is, we're going to fold Kaatsu, which is like an adjunct to the therapy, and we're going to have you use that if you want. And I said, well, what's it going to do? And they said, well, it should help you heal a lot faster. And it should help with a lot of the chronic pain in your shoulders and whatnot. And so I said, okay, hey, anything to get me back in the fight faster, I'm all about it. And so long story longer, they did all the PT, and at 6 months, so almost half the time, I was at 95% strength, mobility, and agility. And that really got my attention. And then
we'll put the link of Kaatsu somewhere in the podcast, and we might put a picture up. But please do. For somebody who's asking themselves, well, what is this? Is this a pill? Is it a device? How would you describe it?
This is one of the armbands. It's
kind of like a restricted device, isn't it?
Yeah, they stretch. Okay. You know? So this is an elastic pneumatic band, and you connect it to your smartphone, and you wear it up high on your arm, or the leg bands, you wear it up high on your legs.
It's linked with your smartphone, and you can wear it all day, or what? How's that work?
Well, you wear it during your workout, or you wear it during your rehab, or in some cases, you can use it in a passive use. Okay. So when the bands inflate, you still have circulation going through the limb, but you're dilating all the tissue, all the venous tissue in the limb. So you're slowing the venous return. Okay. And what's amazing, when you do that and you start doing any kind of multi-joint movement, it feels like you're working much harder than you are. So what happens, your body has a hormonal response. You're creating.
It's a stress. It's a slight but important stress factor, which helps your body go into that. I don't know what you would call it. I guess restoring mode
right. You got it. So you're creating metabolic stress. Okay. It feels like, let's say you're lifting a soup can and you're doing it repeatedly while you're wearing this. Very quickly, that soup can will feel like 30, 40, 50 pounds. And
I think I've actually seen that at the gym.
Yeah. There's a lot of knockoff companies. Dr. Sato started this in Tokyo about 50 years ago. Yeah. The original units were the size of small suitcases,
as usual.
And so now you have Bluetooth enabled compressors on the bands themselves, and you control them with the phone, and you go through these cycles of pressure. Okay. So during the pressure on period, everything dilates in the tissue distal of the band. And then during the pressure off cycle, you get about 5 seconds of new blood coming through and flushing everything out. And then you have a little bit higher pressure, and it does it all in the background automatically. So in my case, when I started doing the physical therapy on my shoulder, everything felt much harder, but you get a hormonal response as if you're moving heavy weight. And
now you don't have to be a Navy SEAL to be able to get something like this, or?
No. What's interesting is our biggest demographic is ladies over 60.
Okay.
So sarcopenia, you've heard of sarcopenia, muscle wasting, and frailty, and all the concerns that come
so it helps with degenerative bone and muscle things as well?
Definitely on muscle, and definitely with connective tissue, and you have capillaries everywhere, right? Okay. Yeah. So all the way down to the capillaries, you're dilating tissue, and you're just helping improve blood flow. So if you think about an older lady that's sedentary and she's getting a lot of atrophy in her major muscle groups, this is a way to create hypertrophy and build muscle. Yeah. So our oldest client was 104 years old. And it's and this gets back to the serving others. So my focus in this company is the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Department of Defense, because there's a chronic pain aspect.
Actually, I have somebody I might be able to link you up with. We'll talk about that offline afterwards.
Okay.
A friend of mine is the former Secretary of the Army, something or other. He does something I'll link you guys up afterwards.
All right. Okay. But it's helping a lot of teammates that have residual limb issues and chronic pain, and physical therapy and that kind of thing.
So if and I'm hoping if some I've got hip issues. I'm already thinking about. If somebody's listening and wants to know, hey, how do I get a hold of something like this? Do you get this through your physician, or do you have to be in physical therapy? Do you have to get this through a hospital? How would you source a product like this?
Well, our website would be one way.
Okay. We'll definitely put that link on there.
Yep. Kaatsu.com. KAATSU.com.
Do you guys have representation in Europe?
We do. We have distributors in Germany, Spain.
I'm just asking in case they need to know where they're ordering it from.
Yeah, I don't think we have anybody in Austria where you are.
That's fine. Germany's close distributor
enough. Yeah, they cover down on Austria. Yeah. But we're in 79 countries right now. Our business model is mostly affiliates.
Okay.
So the affiliates get discount codes, and then they get a commission off anything they move, and they do it all via our website.
Okay.
We do have nonprofits that will purchase this for military personnel that are struggling. Right now, the nonprofits are exclusively in the special operations space. So we don't have big Army, Navy, Air Force doing that yet, but we're moving in that direction.
Good.
And it helps a lot of guys. It helps guys. I use it personally all the time.
Wow.
But
that's really good. Now, this we're not done, because you're a master of many trades. You've got other projects in the pipeline that I like to hear as well. I know a little bit about, but our listeners don't. Tell us a little bit about some of the other nonprofit and support work that you do.
Well, I like talking to colleges, students, teams, organizations. I like to take the lessons that I've learned in the SEAL teams and sharing them with others. Especially, my favorite is college age kids that are, they're like a sponge. They're just taking in all this information. And I like to get up in front of those guys and just say, hey, look, these are things that I wish somebody had told me when I was your age. Lessons that I learned along the way. And, we talked about a couple of them, but kind of like the trust, how important trust is in relationships. And, attitude and tenacious spirit, making habit of doing the little things right, all that kind of stuff. There's so many angles you can go with it. And I truly enjoy that. And then what I do is guys that I'll do a lot of it pro bono, but sometimes organizations are willing to pay, and I'll take the big chunk of that and push it to the UDT SEAL Association. So we have a lot of foundations out there, a lot of nonprofits to help people in special operations and in the SEAL teams. But I picked the UDT SEAL Association. I like pushing resources to them because they help a lot of my veteran teammates. So that's another kind of service.
Well, I'm going to mention here for anybody who's listening. If anybody who's listening to this podcast said, I'd love to hear John talk some more. We'll give your link information if they want to reach out to you directly. You do speaking engagements, you do keynotes, you'll come do trainings and stuff like that. I'd love for anybody that listens to this to reach out to you. But what we're also going to be doing is, we mentioned this before we started, we're working on an online academy for project, program, and portfolio managers. And I've put I'm going to extend the offer to you once again. Maybe we can put something together where we create a structured seminar where we use your lessons learned from Spec Ops. Talk about what does it really take? What are the leadership qualities that you need? What are the administrative and frameworks that you need to create high performing small teams? I think that would be a very interesting topic for our community. But like I said, I'll reach out to you towards the end of the year to see if we can make that happen. Okay.
Yeah. Sounds good, Mark.
So you still got one more thing. You're just like Santa Claus. You got a bunch of things in your bag. You haven't even mentioned one of your passion projects. Okay. Now, one of the things I often ask people in my podcast is, how do we know each other?
I know where you're going.
Well, how do we know each other? And since you're one of my first guests that I don't know immediately, but I know you over a different corner. Let's make a shout out to the Ott family, to all of them. That's how through through Kevin. He linked us up. This is a family that I met many, many years ago when I was living in Turkey. Their father is one of the OG UDT SEAL guys, was also, I believe, a captain, right?
Normot. Yep.
Yeah,
He's
Norman
famous
an
famous in the
icon.
community.
Icon.
Yes,
I wish he was still
absolutely
alive because I would love to have him on my back. He was one of the first leadership mentors I had in my life when I was in Scout. He was my Scoutmaster, a stand-up guy through and through. Got 3 wonderful kids. I don't know how many grandchildren. They're just sprouting everywhere. Shout out to the Ott family, and I'd love to also kind of make this podcast a kind of a tribute to Norm because he was a great man that you got to know as well.
Mark. Hey, Kurt and I have become very close friends over the years that I've lived here, and I have nothing but the highest respect for that.
He's
guy.
a great guy,
and I hope you're going to talk about the Tampa Bay Frog Bites.
Yes, that's where I wouldn't let you off the podcast. You're saving the best for I don't know about the best, but one of the best for last. I have been following Kurt on Facebook and wherever else I see him, and also Kathy's also has swum a couple times. You've got this crazy but great project that you do in Tampa Bay. Tell us about it. The Frog Swim.
So in 2010, I'll give you a little background. There was a team guy, Dan Kanasan, unfortunately lost both legs in Afghanistan. And right out of the gate, there were some local guys here who put their heads together and came up with, hey, there's got to be something we can do to help Dan's family. So, our foundations, there were resources there, but not a lot at that time. Since then, they've grown a fair amount. But anyway, we decided, there were about 30 of us. We decided to kind of under the radar, swim across Tampa Bay, a short portion, about 5 kilometers from St. Pete's side to the Tampa Peninsula that MacDill Air Force Base is on. And so we picked what we thought would be one of the coldest, most miserable days of the year, in the middle of a cold snap in January. And that was the first swim. It would
be too easy, right?
Yeah, we didn't want it to be easy. We wanted to be kicking the nuts, to be hard, to help people, kind of reflect on the way across the bay, how the wounded guys, the fallen, and especially the Gold Star families that are left behind.
Yeah.
So that first one, we all ended at the American Legion afterwards on the Tampa side. And we were hoping to make, like $3,000 or $4,000. And everybody agreed before this swim. And I mean, we're talking like literally hours of planning, not days, just a couple hours.
Well, that's how the first ones usually run.
Yeah. And so we're at the American Legion, and I remember guys pulling IOU notes out of their pockets, handwritten checks, little wads of cash, and there was this picnic table, and this guy Rory and Dan and Kurt and some other guys, and I was there, and we started adding all this little pile of money up that was set aside for the Kanasan family. And it ended up not being like $3,000. It ended up being about 10 times that much.
Wow.
And that is when we realized, wow, we might be onto something here.
And what wonderful thing to create something that's fun that also does good.
Yeah. And so now the swim, jump forward to 2023, our last swim in January. We do it every January. The last swim made well over $1 million for the Navy SEAL Foundation. So each year we stair-stepped more and more and more. We started getting sponsors. We started getting people digging deeper or talking to different types of people who want to pay it forward. And what I really like about this event is, yes, it's about the teams. Yes, it's about the brotherhood and bringing the brotherhood together. Yes, it's about the injured guys and the fallen guys. But the Gold Star family aspect of this event is, in my opinion, what it's really all about.
No, I agree with you. That's beautiful.
Oh yeah, you have people that come from around the country, team guys and non-team guys. The event sells out very quickly in August.
What's the max
10
of
minutes.
Participants?
We keep it about 150 personnel and then 150 kayakers. But
do you have to show that you're capable in some form or fashion?
Yeah, you need to be able to show that you can spend an hour. And we let guys wear wetsuits. We encourage wetsuits, actually. And, if you're not a strong swimmer, wear fins. It's not a race.
Yeah.
It's an event to remember our fallen teammates and celebrate their lives and celebrate. And I emphasize celebrate because we have a badass party afterwards. And a lot of Gold Star families are there, and they get to interact with people that knew their brothers, their sons, and their fathers like nobody else. And it's just an incredible event. All the money that we raise goes to the Navy SEAL Foundation and supports these Gold Star families.
Was Norm still involved with that in any form or fashion?
Let's see. What year did he pass away? Do you remember?
It was.
I think it was before we started this.
I think it might have been before. I think it was before. You guys started in 90? And when did you start? In 2010. Yeah, I think it was after his pass. The reason I ask is because I don't know whether he initiated, but when we lived in Istanbul together, it's not the same distance. But I told you this. He was big on what was called the Bosporus swim. We would swim from the Asian side over to the European side. So all of his kids and him, they would organize that from the embassy, and we had also about 50 different people swimming across. So it's funny how
you guys would swim from Asia to Europe.
Yeah. But of course, it's not the same distance. But still, I think that's an amazing story. So if anybody who's interested in sponsoring a swimmer or being a swimmer themselves, we'll put the link on there. Right? You guys have a website for it. When's the deadline for registering?
Well, we've passed it for the next swim.
There's always another year
in August.
Yeah.
And it's Tampa Bay Frogman swim. Let's see. Yeah, TampaBayFrogman.com.
Yeah.
Tampa Bay
Frogman. We'll definitely put that in on the screen and a link on the bottom so people have that.
Yeah. But just incredible event.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that. That's great. One last thing that's also kind of a staple of our podcast is, and I think you have a short list of ones that you would recommend. I'm still a big fan of reading. I don't always get around to it as much as possible. And there's also Audible books. Are there any books out there that you say would be good for anybody who wants to know, hey, what do I need to know about leadership or about management that a SEAL could tell me? Are there particular books that you would recommend? I've got the list in case you don't have them off the top of your head.
Well, I don't know if there's so much leadership and management, but I really enjoyed Startup Nation. I think it's called Startup Nation, the story of Israel's economic miracle. And it talks about the value of startups.
Awesome.
And that was, as I was transitioning out of the military, I was going down this big, I was in the third interview with Amazon, and I was looking at executive recruiting for Amazon. And the other thing I was looking at was Kaatsu, which is an established company in Japan, but it's a startup. It was a startup in 2017 in America. So that book, one of the things I really liked about it is when you're thinking about a startup approach, when you go into a small organization, right out of the gate, you're now one of the senior leaders in the organization.
Yeah, I often say I once managed a startup company actually in Miami. It's a pity that we didn't meet when I was in Miami, but I was managing a startup company there, and you know how you have this business card as this CEO or CTO or CIO and whatever EIO. McDonald had a farm. I used to always laugh because people would ask me what I was responsible for. I said I was responsible for cleaning the head. I was responsible for finance. I was responsible for strategy. I I was responsible for getting lunch for the team. I was responsible for pretty much everything and anything. So I think it's a great recommendation, because startup is such a wonderful example of small agile project thinking. Also, there's a lot of spec op kind of mentality in there. You know, this team element and creating a spirit that carries you over the hardship is definitely a thing. The second book you had here is from Arthur Brooks, right? Strength to Strength.
Yeah, Strength to Strength. Great book. Talks about that all of us have these kind of at least two curves in our lives. And the first curve is usually whatever you're doing in your first, your professional young adult life. And the point that everybody's first curve, no matter who you are and no matter what you think, everybody's curve starts to fall, right? Yeah. Now, a history professor's first curve might last longer than a pro athlete's, of course, but the value of life is not a lot of times that first curve, but it's that second curve and what you build that second curve. Yeah. It's a fabulous book.
That's beautiful.
It's a really good listen too.
I like. And then, I mean, as a former military expert, you can't leave out Sun Tzu, right? The Art of War.
Yeah, when you sent me those questions, I turned around and I looked at my bookcase, and I can't tell you how many examples throughout the SEAL teams and even in small business that I've gotten out of this Sun Tzu book, The Art of War.
It is valuable because, a lot of people think, the Art of War, it's all about let's go out there and beat somebody down, or it's a gruesome and gruel, but it's quite the opposite. I mean, there's lots of wisdom in there where you need to pick your battles and all
the path less traveled,
Yeah.
How valuable going the direction that nobody is expecting or nobody maybe thinks you should go, how valuable that can be for an organization. And I've applied that to a lot of my life.
Yeah. I've got a bunch of questions. I'm sure I've forgotten some, but there's one more on the list, and I liked your answer. So the question number 9 is, who are your idols and why?
Well, good Catholic boy, I can't of course get out of this conversation without talking about Jesus. The ultimate leader and motivator in my mind. I'm distantly related also to Jimmy Doolittle. No, well, we're all related to Jesus, of course. But I'm distant relation to Jimmy Doolittle from the Doolittle raid, World War II.
Okay.
The guy that led the 16 B-25 bombers off the, what was the name of the carrier? The Hornet, USS Hornet.
Was that where they scaled down the B-52s to fly over Japan?
No, there weren't B-52s or B-25s.
B-25.
So small bombers.
But it was like a really scary mission where they scaled them down and they took off from the aircraft carriers?
Yep. First time it ever happened. These types of bombers taken off from carriers. And it was our first response after Pearl Harbor. And they were seen they were seen early. So they had to make a decision whether to launch. And there's this great scene in Jimmy Doolittle's book. I Could Never Be So Lucky Again is the name of the book.
Yeah.
And he pulls everyone together, and they were going to have to launch in order to get the birds off before the carrier battle group had to go into defensive operations, because they were pretty sure they were going to be attacked.
Yeah.
And so they were going to have to turn around or go a different direction. So they had to launch, and he pulled all the crews, all 16 of the crews, on the flight decks. And there's great pictures of it. And he's kind of a shorter guy, and he's standing in the middle of all this massive humanity. And he's basically telling them that the mission has changed. And most, if not all of us, may not come back from this. All our extraction plans have now gone out the window.
Well, I think they ultimately they had to land on the mainland in China and Indonesia or wherever it was, and then they were pretty much left up to themselves.
Yeah, a lot of them didn't make it that far, and but to a person,
wow,
every one of them raised their hands and wanted to still go.
Wow,
and just an incredible leader. I met him at the Air Force Academy in 1988. That was my only time ever meeting him.
Wow,
and he was out there to do the groundbreaking for Doolittle Hall, but funny story behind that. But and then last idol, I got to say, my dad.
I wouldn't let you off without this one, because I would agree with you. It's similar for me, but I want to hear who's your third, if probably not your first in some ways.
Yeah, of course, my dad. I mean, it's fortunate for me that he is still around, and to this day, just yesterday I called him with kind of an issue, right? A problem, and talking to my dad is like talking to multiple generations. I get all that historical perspective wrapped up in his perspective of everything he's done. He retired Air Force. He also did 30 plus years in the National Ski Patrol. So service. And then he was a senior VP for Southwest Bell for about 30 years as well. So he's got great perspective. And I'm very blessed to still have him to reach back to.
Good. John, it's been a real pleasure. I knew that I had a ringer when Kurt hooked us up.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate everything.